Welcome to the Think Yourself Healthy podcast, where you meet the intersection of mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Heather Duranja, founder of Nutrition Vixen, registered dietitian, nutritionist, personal trainer, and cognitive behavioral specialist. I'm a mother, author, self-improvement junkie, and recovering perfectionist turned professional half-asser. Each week, I'll be bringing on a guest or a topic that will help you go from surviving to thriving. Are you with me? All right, here we go with today's episode. Hello, everybody. On today's show, we have Elaine Morrison, the founder of Elaine Wellness. She helps women feed their body from within. Her own health crisis 6 years ago taught her that food matters. Eating to nourish your body doesn't need to be expensive or complicated. She also learned how to find a doctor that will work with you to resolve your health issues. You can learn to be your own health advocate. She's also passionate about changing the narrative around aging, especially for women. Aging is a privilege. Absolutely. Amen to that. Well, Thank you so much, Elaine, for being on my guest today on the Think Yourself Healthy podcast. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm really excited about this platform that you're building. It's awesome.
Thank you. I'm pretty excited myself. I can't hide that. I feel this is an area that definitely needs to have lots and lots of conversations so that we can kind of start changing that regular dialogue when it comes to the way we approach our health and wellness. And so there's a lot of conversations that need to be had. And I'm grateful for being able to create a platform to make that happen. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
So tell us a little bit about you, Elaine, and your personal crisis that got you here.
So it happened 6 years ago. I was 44 years old. I was teaching Pilates full time. I was managing 2 studios. I was working 6 days a week. And all of a sudden, I just noticed I would sleep 10 hours a night and I would drag myself out of bed. I was exhausted. Then I had bought a new pair of pants and suddenly within a few weeks, I couldn't button them. I was starting to gain weight. Nothing about my diet had changed. Nothing about my exercise had changed. And then my hair, I noticed my hair was falling out. And I went to my hairstylist and she was like, what's going on? Like, your hair's breaking, it's falling out. So I went to my doctor and I told her what was going on. And she was like, well, you know, you're 44, this is just what happens. I was like, really? So I basically had to beg her to test my thyroid, to test my hormones. And I had read Sarah Gottfried's books. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Oh, yes, very familiar.
Yeah. And so that was the first time I had ever heard of something called Hashimoto's. And so my doctor was like, well, test your TSH, but I will not test you for thyroid antibodies. I was like, okay, fine. Well, my TSH came back. It was over 8.
Wow.
That is, you should be in like the 2 to 3 range. So then I went to a naturopath who the first thing she said was, oh my gosh, we're going to test you for Hashimoto's. So I came back. My Hashimoto's antibodies were over 1,100, which is really high.
Yeah.
So I got put on levothyroxine and really quickly I started to feel better. And then all of a sudden, about 6 weeks after the levothyroxine, like there was this little red dot on my stomach and then another one and another one and another one. And I'm like, what in the world is this? And then I would say within a matter of like 7 to 10 days, it was all over me. It started on my back, my shoulders, all these red, dry dots everywhere. And so I had gotten in to see an endocrinologist and she took one look at me and she said, we've got to send you to a medical dermatologist. And so I went to him and he took one look at me and he's like, oh, this is guttate psoriasis, which is unusual in your 40s. It usually comes on when you're a teenager. It's usually caused by like strep or some sort of bacterial infection. So he then sent me to another dermatologist who said, oh, the only way you can get rid of this is it's basically like a medical tanning bed.
Okay.
It's UV light.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if you see, I'm very fair. So I show up and the receptionist is like, oh, here's your waiver. And I'm looking at this waiver. It's literally like 15 pages long. Like
wow.
if you get skin cancer, you're not going to sue us, basically.
Wow.
I'm thinking,
that's frightening.
This is insane. So I go back to this endocrinologist who, she's like, well, you've got 2 autoimmune disorders now. They're clustering. You're probably going to end up with lupus. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what is happening? Mm-hmm. And so she sends me to this blood lab. They do all this blood draw on me. I'm like, no, I refuse to accept this. I go home, I start reading everything I can get my hands on. And I'm like, food has got to be the solution here. And I, at the time, had become vegan. And I think why I had become vegan is because everything was upsetting my stomach. My digestion was a mess. Now I realize probably had leaky gut at the bare minimum. So I go back to this endocrinologist. I'm like all proud of myself with all my notes. And I'm like, oh, so food, right? I need to like take gluten out and dairy and this and that. And she was like, kind of the eyebrow. She goes, well, if it makes you feel better here, like you go right ahead. But she said, there's no science to it. I never went back to her. Mm-hmm. I changed my diet. And by the way, they had pulled me off the levothyroxine. They thought maybe I was allergic to the binders in it. I did this crazy amount of allergy testing. I mean, it was kind of a medical circus. And once I changed my diet, basically started eating an autoimmune paleo diet, is when the symptoms started reversing themselves. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing.
That's awesome. How long had you been vegan at that time?
I had been vegan for probably about 3 years. And then prior to that, I became vegetarian when I was 20.
Okay.
If I trace this all the way back, what I realized, so I didn't start my period until I was about 14 or 15. I would have my period maybe once or twice a year. When I was 20, I go to a gynecologist. She's like, oh, I can give you your period. Here's birth control. So she never tested my thyroid, never tested my hormones, nothing. Here's birth control.
Yeah.
I spent 17 years on hormonal birth control. But now when I look back, all the digestive problems started the minute I went on birth control.
Okay.
And I became vegetarian because my stomach was a mess.
Okay.
And then it got so bad that I was like, oh, well, I need to become vegan. Well, I think being vegan left me anemic and totally B12 deficient.
Yeah. So unfortunately, with the, as a dietitian in my practice, what I see a lot of times, right around that 3-year mark of a woman who has gone on a vegan diet and has some underlying factors, the thyroid is the first to go. Yep. And then that typically ends up transitioning into other autoimmune diseases to present themselves. So typically the thyroid is the first to go. And then within 3 to 6 months, all of a sudden it's piggyback. Autoimmune after autoimmune disease starts, presenting themselves. For myself, so I got diagnosed with a kidney disease when I was 18. It's an autoimmune disease. And I tried to do a vegan diet. And once I started initiating that process, it ended up wreaking havoc on my body because with this kidney disease, my IgA antibodies attack proteins. And so as they're filtering through the nephrons in my kidneys, it also attacks the tissue that the nephrons are made of. So my body can't differentiate what is a dietary protein versus what is actual tissue. And unfortunately, without me putting those kind of proteins into my system, my body just destroys itself. And so unfortunately for me, the thyroid was one of those things that just completely got attacked. And I felt terrible. I mean, I had no energy. I was lethargic. I was sleeping. When I ended up getting pregnant, it was just horrible. I was so ill. And yeah, so I completely can understand exactly the position you were in. And for me, there's nothing more irritating when I hear a client come back and say, well, I went to the doctor and the doctor said this is just part of the aging process. I'm like, okay, well, I'm here to call bullshit on that.
Yeah.
This is not the way aging is supposed to be. And there's just this huge misconception out there that, you know, our hormones are supposed to go out of whack. Our periods are supposed to be terrible.
Yes.
Our skin, our hair, you know, our digestive issues, the aches and pains, muscle recovery, that all of that's normal. Those things are not normal. Those are red flags that a body is presenting to us that things are not in order and they need to be addressed.
Yeah.
So I so feel for you, but I also honor you that you did not accept that as your truth and you decided that you wanted to advocate for your own well-being. And that's such a beautiful thing because I feel like most Americans really are naive in the sense that they think our medical system has our best interests. And, you know, I have to defend the doctors a little bit because I feel like they do take the blunt of the repercussions when it comes to these unfortunate circumstances like what you were in.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that insurance companies are pretty much dictating what the doctors can and cannot do. And so their hands really are tied. And that's where the challenge comes into play. And then the doctors are the ones that ultimately end up getting blamed for not being able to provide appropriate care.
Right.
So I just want to throw that out there, you know, because I know so many amazing doctors that do have everyone's best, you know, interest at heart. But they just can't do certain things because insurance just won't allow for that to happen. So if you are listening and you have gone to your doctor and they have told you no, I would encourage you to do a little more investigating around that to find out why they're saying no. Is this because the insurance isn't wanting to pay for a particular test? Like for instance, the doctor saying that they wouldn't test your TPO, your antibodies. Chances are they're just the insurance company wouldn't pay for it. And so that's why the doctor wouldn't order that test. And if that's the case, there are so many amazing resources out there for affordable testing that you can pay out of pocket. For me, not having health insurance majority of my life, I've had to utilize all of these other outlets. And the reality is it's probably saved me a ton of money had I actually had insurance. It's also given me peace of mind knowing that the things that I desire are being evaluated, and it's being evaluated on my terms, not some insurance companies. So,
right. Yeah, there's different resources.
And unfortunately, not all states are created equal. I know New York has a lot of restrictions on what can be done there. So with clients that I have that are in New York, sometimes we have to get them to cross over to the state line to be able to go and get their lab work done because it's against the law in New York to use a third-party company. So,
oh wow, interesting.
Yeah. So let's talk about this anti-aging stuff. So, you know, I know in my practice, and for myself, I have, you know, gained 25 quality years of life based on my lifestyle practices. And I hear all the time from people, you know, my oldest daughter is 23, and people will just assume that her and I are sisters. And then when they find out I'm the mom, they're like, what's the secret sauce? And I'm like,
Right.
Well, it's really not that secret. It's like, to me, it's common sense. But unfortunately, that isn't the reality for most people. They don't realize the importance diet plays. And the reality is, it's not just diet. It's, our thoughts, because our thoughts trigger our behaviors, and then behaviors determine consistency and outcomes. So I have like particular pillars that I like to call it, hydration, nutrition, exercise, appropriate supplementation, sleep, and stress management, and then gut health management, which kind of ties in with like appropriate supplementation. So those are the big pillars for me in terms of how I've been able to reverse the so-called aging process. Personally, I think I'm aging like I'm supposed to. And unfortunately, the rest of the world is just accelerating their process with their lifestyle factors.
Exactly. I just came back from Kauai celebrating my mom's 90th birthday, and I was stunned. I mean, I live in LA, right? So everybody, it's all the pretty people, right? But I was just stunned and heartbroken at how overweight people are. And I'm not saying that to judge or shame people, but what is the quality of life that you want to have? And I think it goes back to what you said a few minutes ago about the narrative that we're sold as women from the time we're very little girls, right? Your period is going to be awful. It's a curse. It's terrible. We've got to shut it down, cut your brain off from your ovaries, right? Because that's really what happens when you take birth control pills. Your brain and your body don't talk. Then you're sold this narrative of pregnancy, your body's out of control. When I was married, I got pregnant, I had a miscarriage, and oh my God, I mean, I would go home from appointments like in tears, because it's like, well, don't eat this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, everything's no, don't, nut. And childbirth, being a Pilates instructor, so many clients are so terrified of childbirth, when I'm like, but your body knows what to do, but get in a state of relaxation, right? And then now I'm 50, and so I'm in perimenopause, right? And the narrative that is sold around menopause, that you're just going to be old and you're just going to look horrible and you're going to feel horrible and you're not going to sleep, and the list just goes on and on and on. I'm like, what is this bullshit?
Yeah.
What is this?
Right. No,
it doesn't have to be that way, but I think it goes into, what is your mindset around aging, and what do you believe around aging, right? So get your mindset right. Like, my mother went to graduate school in her 50s.
Right. Okay.
I have some clients who are in their 70s. I have one client who, I feel like clients come to me with a message often, and she decided to go to medical school in her 40s.
Oh, that's awesome.
Medical school.
Yeah.
She was a mother. She had children, and she was like, I'm doing this for myself because I want to do this. And she just retired at 75.
Well, that's fabulous.
So,
yeah,
and
I don't fit the mold in terms of what the narrative is that I was supposed to have abided by. I didn't go back to school to become a registered dietitian until I was 30. And then I spent 7 years going through to get my master's. I'm a strong believer in education. I love education. I'm still contemplating on whether or not I want to go back and get a PhD. I have a feeling that is something that eventually I will pursue. It's not because I need to prove anything to myself. It's more of just because I actually enjoy learning and applying the knowledge. But I think you bring up a good point, that we have these narratives that we're sold, and then we literally create circumstances to serve those narratives. And for myself at 18, when I got diagnosed with this kidney disease, and they told me that within 5 years I was going to need dialysis or transplant, I chose right then, nope, I refuse to attach myself to this diagnosis, and that is not going to be my outcome. And so I decided that I had to be my own healthcare advocate, because at the time I couldn't get health insurance for having a pre-existing condition.
Right.
So, I think for me personally, that was probably more motivating than the average person who does have health insurance and can go to the doctor. But most people go and then they obtain some sort of information and then they just accept that as the truth. And then they feel frustrated, they feel overwhelmed, they feel hopeless, and then they decide, well, I guess it's just not in the cards for me. I'm going to have to accept that I'll never have energy levels. I'll always have aches and pains. I'm going to have to deal with these skin issues and digestive issues. And, I'm never going to be able to think clearly and all of that stuff. And so for you being in a situation where you get, these diagnoses,
right,
and you decide this is not going to be my fate, what was it in you specifically that made you decide to advocate for yourself?
Several things. I had watched my dad go through severe heart disease in his early 70s. He spent 56 days in the hospital, and there really was no medical reason as to why he should have lived. Mm-hmm. And then my dad had served in the military in his early life. And so when he came home, he had lost 56 pounds in 56 days. I mean, he was like a skeleton.
Wow.
He set these little goals where I'm going to walk from the bed to the door of the bedroom. And then I'm going to walk from there to the bathroom. Right. And so I watched him literally pull himself out. He had a choice when he came home. He could have just laid in bed and said, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. Or he decided to make these little steps. And he lived 14 years after his heart attacks and surgeries and everything. So I think I had that modeled to me, that you don't give up.
Right.
And I just was like, no, I've been healthy. I've been working out. I'm a Pilates instructor, thought I was eating well as a vegan. And I just really was determined that this was not going to define me. Mm-hmm. And I think illness is an opportunity. It's an invitation to get curious about your own life. Mm-hmm. Because I often think there's something deeper that's driving that illness. And so I knew enough that when they were saying, nope, you're just going to have to take medication. Nope, there's nothing you can do. I was like, really, I'm calling bullshit on that, right? Because that's not true. And I refuse to buy it. And so even to this day, when people say, how are you? I always answer with, I am well, right? Because what you put after I am is what you embody.
Right.
So I am well.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah. And it's little things like that really allow us to retrain our brain in that dialogue that sends the message to the nervous system on how the nervous system is going to respond. And with that being said, when you say, illness is an invitation to really look within and ask yourself, what is going on here? That couldn't be more true. And this is a really important conversation that I feel like we need to start bringing to the surface when we're thinking about the approach we take to our health and wellness, because the reality is nutrition is great. And exercise is great, but if we don't start at the core, the root problem, we're always going to be staying in neutral, that survival mode, right? And so we're never really going to get to that longevity and vitality that we desire. And then on top of that, it's very hard to maintain consistency around nutrition and exercise if we can't understand the root, the barriers that, are standing in the way. And so what I see most often in practice is that stress is the number one culprit that initiates the, chronic disease. Let's just say that. And so unfortunately, our brain is so powerful. The second that we start having worry, negative thoughts, it elicits a very specific hormonal response that initiates the sympathetic nervous system. And we get into that fight or flight mode. And there are a very particular hormonal pathway that's going to occur because the body thinks that it is in survival mode. What most people don't realize is that when that initiates, the pH of our blood gets altered and we become more acidic. And if the blood becomes more acidic, our body is literally allocating all of its resources just to neutralize the bloodstream so our heart, lungs, and brain can function appropriately.
Right.
So over long periods of time, we're literally just trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
Our body does not have the ability to produce hormones efficiently. It doesn't have the ability to rest and digest, therefore healing and repair. Absorption and breakdown of nutrients gets impaired. Ultimately, that impacts, our gut health. That opens up the door for things to start getting into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there. And then that initiates more of that stress response, suppresses the immune system. And next thing we know, we're getting all of these diagnoses of autoimmune diseases. And we're sitting back going, well, I don't understand. How is this happening? Right? Well, it makes perfect sense to me because we're not setting ourselves up for success. And so the reality is we have to really take a step back and start investing our energy and efforts into places we don't value, which are changing behavior, looking at our expectations, our to-do list, why are we choosing to do the things? At the beginning of this conversation prior to coming on, you and I were talking about me moving from the Midwest to California because I wanted to live in a place that was more in alignment with the kind of lifestyle that I desired.
Right.
Well, I grew up with a mentality that I had to stay close to my family, but I decided that that wasn't my truth. Why do I have to accept that? I get to make choices. I get to do what I want. Kind of like when I got the diagnosis with the kidney disease. Well, why do I have to accept that I have this diagnosis and that transplant and dialysis are reality for me in 5 years? So you also said the same thing, that for you, when you got these diagnoses, you decided that that wasn't going to be your truth.
No.
So for the average person, and you mentioned that you had behavior modeled for you that inspired you to want to choose differently. So for the average person who doesn't have that kind of example, what advice can you give to them? How do they get started? How do they choose?
Right. So I get asked this a lot, since Hashimoto's is so common among women. Start really, really small. Because and I've seen this from teaching Pilates, right? People want a new diet, a new exercise program, new, right?
So are you saying manage your expectation? Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. I know we live in the world of instant gratification and everything's fun and everything comes right to your front door and it happens like this. But our little reptilian brains, right? They adapt slowly. And so I tell people, first of all, I don't believe in diets, right? I believe in eating real food. And that right there, people will go, oh, wait, but don't you have like a formula or don't you have a this or that? I'm like, notice what you eat in a day. How much of it are you taking out a pair of scissors and opening up a package? How much of it is processed? Are you reading labels? And the message I want people to understand is it does not have to be difficult or complicated. You want to set yourself up for success. And believe me, I had spent 25 years being vegetarian and vegan, meaning I hadn't eaten chicken, fish, or meat in 25 years. It started literally with 2 bites of fish. And that was that, right? And I will say, incorporating animal protein back into my diet, I really started to feel better quickly. But I would just say to people, if you want to write it on a piece of paper, great, but just observe, what do you eat in a day, and get really honest with yourself about that.
I agree. I do want to say, just so that we can clarify this for the audience, there are many people out there who can do a vegetarian and vegan diet very healthfully and not suffer any kind of consequences.
Right.
Now, in my experience as a practitioner and in my own personal experience with autoimmune disease, if there are predetermined factors that are playing against you, lifestyle environment is going to really make or break whether or not you can healthfully sustain that vegetarian vegan diet. So like for myself, being that I had this autoimmune disease, trying to incorporate the vegan lifestyle was a very detrimental circumstance for me, but that was because of my own biological and physiological circumstances at hand. Right. So if a person is under a lot of stress, if they're not sleeping well, if their thoughts are constantly racing, they've got a lot of things that are working against them that typically contributes to digestive distress, which means the body isn't going to be absorbing nutrients as efficiently as possible. You may want to reconsider initiating any kind of vegetarian or vegan diet initially until we get some of these things under control to set ourselves up for success. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I want people to be really crystal clear. I'm not here to shame anyone for being vegan or vegetarian. I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm not a doctor. I'm not, so people make their own choices.
Absolutely. Sure. And, I've had a lot of conversations with individuals, and they were like, oh my gosh, I thought I was doing the right thing. And it's not that we're not doing the right thing. It's just that right now, these circumstances may not be the best solution for where your body's at currently. But once we get, body functioning more optimally, body absorbing nutrients, correct nutritional deficiencies, then a person can easily transition into that kind of diet or lifestyle without the severe consequences. Right. So I just wanted to make sure we kind of clarified that and cleared that up for the audience, because there is a lot of, I think, misunderstanding in terms of whether or not a person should go vegan, vegetarian, or not. It's very individualized based on environmental circumstances and lifestyle situations.
Sure. And everyone's body, I have learned, everyone's body, we are all different. Yes. We are all different. And I think it goes back to dropping down into your intuition, right? And really, I feel like we live in a world where, again, I go back to, we're very cut off, right? We're very kind of neck down dead, where we don't listen to our intuition, whether it's about the foods that make us feel good or the circumstances or the relationship or whatever. Drop down into your body and what are you feeling?
So how does a person drop into their body?
Even if you take, like, before we got on this podcast, I just sat here for probably a minute with my eyes closed I just went into my breath, right? And just slow everything down, get present in your body, right? I do this a lot. When I teach Pilates, I find we live in such a chaotic world. And if you can just slow your mind down, and even if that's 30 seconds and it's one deep breath.
Right.
Yeah.
Prior to us starting the podcast, we were having that discussion and I said to you, I used to hear about this place called being, living in the present, like being, Right. And I used to think to myself, well, what the hell does that even mean? How does one get to that being state? Like, are you even kidding me? I remember I had professors tell me, Heather, I like to consider myself a recovering perfectionist and a professional half-asser now. But at one point in my life, that was not the case. And I had professors that would say to me, like, look, you can't sustain this. And it took me to get diagnosed with cancer to understand, oh shit, this really isn't working and something's got to change. Right. And so unfortunately, I was like, well, I guess I got to do the stuff that they talk about, that those things called like meditation, right?
Right.
And I would sit down and try and meditate, and my brain would just be going everywhere, and I'd be judging every single thought. And then I'd jump up and I'd be like, who the hell has time for this? Like, this is never going to work for me.
Right.
And so I had to just keep tackling it day after day after day until it started to get easier. And so when I talk about us having to invest our time, energy, and resources into things that we don't necessarily value, for me, that was one of those habits. I didn't value taking it easy. I didn't value slowing down because that wasn't what was praised in my household. I heard, you have time to rest when you're dead, right?
Yeah.
So there were a lot of stories that I developed as a child around the expectation of how I was supposed to allocate my time. And sitting around taking deep breaths and doing nothing definitely was not a praised behavior. So I think for a lot of people, that's probably, they might have experienced similar circumstances as that. And so it's a very unfamiliar and very uncertain territory to start charting into. It's so uncomfortable. I know for myself, I just wanted to reject it. But my point here is, if you find yourself being that individual, the most important thing that you can do is really take a step back, understand what is the story? What is the real story here that's making me feel so uncomfortable? Being able to identify that and being mindful of that is one way to start getting yourself to transition into new behaviors and trying new things and letting that judgment piece go. And then maintaining consistency. As hard as it is, like, I love your example of I am well. That is such a beautiful and easy thing that we can do to start retraining the brain into believing a new narrative. I am well. When you ask most people, how are you doing? You're like bracing yourself for the response, right? You're like, oh shit, I know this is like a loaded gun, but you feel obligated, like you have to ask the question.
Right.
So I love that. Do you have any other tips like that?
I think when you're making changes around diet or exercise, what is the outcome that you're looking for? Or again, I go back to the feeling. What is the feeling? How do you want to feel? Right? And can you go to that place of visualization of how do I want to feel?
Right.
Right. And then checking those narratives, those stories, right, that we've all grown up with. I'm in a mentorship program for female entrepreneurs, and we're doing a lot of work with, I don't know if you know Byron Katie. Loving What Is one of her books.
Okay.
And it's really just questioning your mind. And it's been profound in this program, right? Here we all are, we're entrepreneurs, we're trying to build businesses that are profitable. And I tell you, Heather, 75% of what they're putting us through is mindset work.
Yeah.
And we're all having these profound shifts around that of what are the old stories? What are the old narratives? Because that's what's often running the show.
Absolutely.
And not running your life.
Absolutely.
Like a runaway freight train, right? So
absolutely.
Get clear on that. And I would say, remind yourself, going back to what you said, you are a human being, not a human doing, right? And we live in a masculine culture that as women, we've had to adapt to, of pushing and forcing and being competitive. And not that any of that is bad, but try to tap back into that feminine wisdom.
I think that can go for both men and women, that we need to tap into that feminine, wisdom and kind of take a step back, because we have been ruled by that masculinity, that, kind of patriarchy type of mindset for so long, that we have created very unrealistic expectations for ourselves. The reality is stress is just driving the whole show. And, back to mindset. Mindset is key. It all starts with our thoughts. And if we don't start putting the efforts there, the exercise, the nutrition, the stress management, the sleep cycle, the gut health, the immune system, they never stand a chance, because again, it goes back to that specific hormonal response that is occurring the second we have that negative thought. I attended a conference back in October of last year. And I was just so surprised by this statistic. And the statistic is that the number one thought that contributes to the stress cycle is shame.
Oh, yeah.
Shame. Yeah. Shame is the number one thought that contributes to initiating the stress response. And if we think about it, we're constantly in shame. We're never a good enough mother. We're never a good enough spouse. We're never a good enough daughter, friend, sibling, employee, entrepreneur, cook, house cleaner, student, whatever it might be. And we're passing ourselves in the mirror, and we're doing it in a body that we absolutely hate. And so we're just constantly walking around in this state of never being good enough. And so that mindset piece is huge when it comes to setting ourselves up for success. And for me, the reality is that it took me, 20 plus years of understanding that the reality is you have to start with your mind if you want all of those things to stay in alignment, so that you can truly achieve the longevity and vitality that everyone is so desperate for.
Right. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier around the narrative that is sold to us as women from a very, very young age, right? Even the term anti-aging, I reject that term, right? Because in my mind, aging is a privilege, right? Ask my 90-year-old mother, who tells me, I never dreamed I would live to be 90, right? She's lived through the Depression, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, civil rights, right? And now she rides around in Uber with my, but I think as women, we've really got to check in with what narrative are you buying into? I wrote an Instagram post about this because you scroll Instagram and you see all these filters and all of, again, you and I are in Southern California where, and I'm not shaming people, please understand that, but Botox and fillers and plastic surgery. And I think do that if that's what you want to do, but drop in. Why are you doing that? And what is the shame, right? I want to remove the shame around.
Absolutely. And I also want to mention that it's not just women. I have worked a lot with men, and men suffer from the exact same thought processes as we females do. And they're holding themselves to the same kind of standards. It's just not discussed as much, right? Because it's not masculine, right? For them to be able to bring these things up. But I have over with my practice, I have really based my practice off of working specifically with females. And I cannot tell you the hundreds and hundreds of messages that I get on a regular basis from men saying, hey, what about us? Like, we're struggling from the exact same thing. So I think as important as it is to have these conversations with women, we still have to address the male audience that is suffering right along with us, but they don't have permission. They don't really have the permission. Right. And so I was really excited when I had the opportunity to do the podcast, because it is a way that I can address both male and female needs. And I feel that it's important, that we do. We can't just isolate ourselves and think that this is just a female concern, because males are suffering just as much as females are around the anti-aging kind of crisis.
Right. And I think to the forefront for me because a lot of the women in this mentorship program, I'm old enough to be their mother, right? They're half my age.
Right.
And I love their enthusiasm and their drive and their curiosity, and they're smart. And, I learn so much from them. But what I've noticed, you cannot fast track wisdom, right? And when the longer you walk the earth, you just learn from life experiences, and you learn to ride the waves, and you realize that not everything is going to be a total catastrophe that you think it is, right? You learn to ride that ebb and flow.
Absolutely.
So I hope people, men and women, understand that aging is a privilege. You don't need to hide it. You don't need to lie about it. It's a beautiful thing.
I agree.
Life
So
is
real quick, I want, because we're
Yeah.
going to be running out of time, but I think this is a perfect segue into
Yeah.
the whole controversy over the Super Bowl with Shakira and J-Lo, and, the fact that J-Lo's this 50-year-old woman.
Right.
I personally did not watch, so I really don't know what all of that is about. I've seen the pictures. I look at the pictures and I think, wow, I don't see anything wrong. I think that they look absolutely phenomenal. If you feel good and you're out there being able to move your body, why wouldn't you want to celebrate it? So,
Right.
I definitely don't buy into the just because we're a specific age means we have to act a certain way. My great aunt, she's so funny. I'm 43 and she says to me, "Don't you think it's about time that you cut that hair off?"
Oh, yeah.
Like, don't you think you're a little too old to be having the long hair? And I looked at her and I said, "No, I'm just fine. Thank you. I appreciate your opinion, but I'm good. Thank you."
Right.
So I think that we just have to stop. We're just contributing to the problem when we're judging and throwing those kind of opinions out there. No one asked. It's not our place to give them. Let's just let people have the freedom to be them, celebrate them. If you're 90 years old and you want to, dress in a little lacy number with thigh highs, I say go for it. Do it. If that makes you feel good, that's all that matters.
Right. Well, who is the woman? I can't think of her name. I want to say her name is Inez or something. She wears these huge black rim glasses.
Yeah.
She's become this like fashion icon in her 90s.
Yeah.
There's another woman, again, I can't think of her name. She's a yoga instructor and she ballroom dances, and I think she's 95 or 98. Yeah. She was on the cover of the Athleta catalog.
Yeah.
Like
you mentioned earlier, I have many, many clients who are in their 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it when I get one of those females who comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm suffering with da-da-da-da-da, and I want to live at least another 20 years. And so I'm ready to start making some changes." And for me, I just get so excited because I see 65-year-olds who are like, "Oh no, my death is knocking at the door." No, there's no reason for me to make change now because I'm dying. And it's like, no, we're not. We can choose. We can choose at any age. It doesn't matter where you're at in the process. If you aren't feeling good, you can make choices that are going to improve your circumstances.
Exactly.
So tell me.
Small little changes.
Yeah. So for the listener out there who maybe has just gotten diagnosed with, Hashimoto's or some other really frightening autoimmune disease,
Mm-hmm.
What piece of advice do you have for them?
So educate yourself, right? There's a lot of great books out there. I'm just about to put a blog post up of the books that have really helped me a lot. I mentioned Sarah Gottfried, Amy Myers. There's a bunch of different books. Read, educate yourself so that you know what you're talking about.
Please let's use credible sources though.
Yes,
it's exactly. So important. Google is not a credible source.
Right. Exactly. Dr. Google doesn't have all the answers.
No.
That is one thing I would do. Another thing, I just put a blog post up yesterday about really get prepared for a doctor's appointment, right? Don't just go in cold and let them run the show.
Absolutely.
So I created a whole post with just ways to get yourself prepared, right? Get your head in the game. Don't be intimidated just because they went to medical school and you didn't. Doesn't mean they have all the answers. Let's take them down off the pedestal, right? So a lot of ways to prepare yourself. You know, and again, don't allow your mind to be a runaway freight train that, you know, this is it, this is the end of the line, I'm going to feel horrible the rest of my life.
Right.
No. Definitely with autoimmunity, it means there's something underneath that you need to address.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I am so appreciative of you taking time today to share with us about your personal journey and some of your tips and tricks that have gotten you to this amazing place. You are absolutely gorgeous. You look phenomenal. I mean, you know, 50 is the new 25. So keep rocking it, lady. You look amazing. So where can the audience find you, and what do you have going on?
So, well, I have a collagen brand. I had a beverage to start, and I got out of the beverage business. I now sell powdered collagen because that was a game changer for me, right? I told you my hair was falling out and breaking. You can see I have a lot of hair.
Oh yes, beautiful.
Thank you. And that was like traumatic for me to think that I might lose my hair. And so I added collagen to my diet, and 6 months later, my hairstylist was like, whoa, what's going on? You've got all this like baby hair growth. So
that's fabulous.
This has been a process, people, right? Yeah. Don't think that I just overnight, right? The world of instantaneous. I did not.
Again, it's setting those expectations.
Expectations and consistency. I've taken collagen consistency for 6 years, and I've noticed it in my hair, skin, and nails. So, ElaineWellness.com is my website where I sell collagen. You can find me on Instagram. Everything is Elaine Wellness.
All right.
I would love to connect with you if you want to DM me on Instagram. I love to talk to people. If I can be of service in any way, that makes me happy. And then I'm still teaching Pilates, because even though I'm an entrepreneur, you still have to work.
Absolutely. Well, I love that. I think that's awesome. You are a testament to what aging is supposed to look like. Right? You are doing it gracefully and beautifully, and I applaud all of your efforts.
Thank you.
I applaud all that you're doing, all that you're giving back, the education, all of it, the advocation. You know, God bless you for all that you are doing. And I am a huge promoter of collagen. Collagen is a staple in my diet. It will continue to be a staple in my diet for the rest of my life. So if you aren't on collagen, I consider you to really, really think hard about incorporating that into your regimen. It's such an easy thing that we can do.
Super easy.
Back onto the road of wellness.
Yeah, quality is a huge deal to me, right? I'm a label reader. So I spent time sourcing a really high quality collagen. It's a German owned supplier from US cows, non-GMO, kosher, grass-fed, all of that. I don't believe in selling crap to other women.
Absolutely.
So that's quality matters.
Absolutely. 100%. I'm a firm believer in that. And I will make sure that in the show notes, I attach all of your information so that the audience can easily find you. I appreciate you being here today. Thank you. And hopefully we can make this happen again. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on the Think Yourself Healthy podcast. I'm so grateful that you stopped by. If you could just take a minute to share this episode with someone you think who would love it, it would be amazing. Take a screenshot that you've listened to the episode and tag at Think Yourself Healthy and myself at Nutrition Vixen so that I can share it. Leave a review on iTunes to let us know how much you loved being here and what you want to hear next. Until next time, don't forget to think yourself healthy. Thanks again, guys. Bye.